This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com. So Shamrock said in Jonathan Snowden's book, Shamrock, the World's Most Dangerous Man, that he didn't necessarily want to be in pro wrestling, but it was the comfort and security of the deal. Did you feel that way when he first signed, that his heart wasn't really in it, but this was the best way to provide for his family?
Well, I definitely feel that it was a combination of all those things. And if his heart wasn't in it, only he would know that. I didn't feel that.
Jim Cornette has said before how excited he was to have him in the fold. Do you know if there were anybody else, was there anybody else behind the scenes saying, oh, goddamn, this is going to be our top guy. This guy has legitimate credibility with the mainstream audience, blah, blah, blah. Who were the big champions? And were there any naysayers about, man, we don't want this guy. He doesn't know what he's doing. Not for this kind of deal.
No, I think that for the most part, everybody was pretty excited to have Ken. And it's a little different too, in the way that, Ken wasn't an asshole. Ken was just one of the boys. Ken was a fighter. Ken was one of the boys. He had been one of the boys and didn't come off like, oh, I'm a big star, that y'all have to treat me differently than everybody else. Ken just came across as one of the guys that you could go out and have a drink with, and was a lot of fun. And people liked him. Then they also saw his ability. He adapted so quickly, back into what we do in sports entertainment, that it was easy to look at him and go, man, I see a future here.
So there's the natural follow-up question. Do you remember there being any conversation about doing anything with his brother, Frank Shamrock?
No.
So there's speculation in the newsletters that Ken's going to be sent to work with your brother Tom in Connecticut, or perhaps head to Calgary to train with the Hart family. Who would have made that decision?
I would have, and I think we did both.
Yeah. So the next thing we see him in, and boy, is it memorable, maybe one of the most memorable things he did, which is kind of funny in hindsight. He's going to be announced as being the special guest referee in a submission match at WrestleMania 13, arguably the greatest match in WrestleMania history, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Bret the Hitman Hart. Whose idea was it to make Shamrock a referee?
I think it was Vince's idea. It was a way to introduce Ken and also be able to put him in right up on top. So Ken was involved in a major program with Sean, with Bret and Steve, and it just fit. It was a good fit specifically for that program of Bret and Steve, that they needed somebody like that, like a Ken Shamrock, to really get in there and be a part of that match. And all the above, it was believable, and Bret and Steve were believable, and Shamrock obviously was believable.
So here's the talk of the creative. Meltzer would say, it's no secret what needs to be done. Basically educating the audience to submissions, with Shamrock portrayed as the master of that game. Will it work? Perhaps not immediately. So the question becomes patience, something pro wrestling promotions have lacked greatly these days in the new head-to-head ratings battle every Monday night. For the short run, Shamrock is not going to be a guy who makes a difference in the ratings, and a new style isn't going to be understood or over with a new audience for him by next Monday night. I don't know if any one person can be a one-man ratings changer, but certainly if there was, it isn't him. But with the right build-up and booking and the right opponent, he should be someone who can draw money and interest on pay-per-view for the right match with the right build. If this becomes the beginning of a new road with more emphasis on mat work, realism, and submission finishes, thus enabling wrestlers to get away with less acrobatic and less high-risk spots and save their bodies in a business where the injury rate and risk seem to get higher by the week, it's better for everyone. But a change like that can't happen overnight. Now that's interesting, especially in hindsight, knowing that what we know now is, well, that's not going to prove out. It's actually going to go the other way. It's going to be more athletic, more acrobatic, more risky. Was there any sort of thinking at the time, because this is still the era, or maybe we're finishing up the era of these almost concrete like rings, and you've got guys injured here and there and yon. Was there some sort of thinking to, hey man, maybe we could go back a little more old school and do a little bit more mat stuff? Or was that not even on Vince's radar here?
That wasn't even on the radar. The whole idea was to
Yeah.
build Ken as the most dangerous man in the world and make him a superstar in that vein.
So his first in-ring performance is on Raw on March 17th. Shamrock's going to be doing commentary, and he's going to accept a challenge from Billy Gunn to get in the ring. He'll take him down, use an armbar and an ankle lock before he lets him go. Obviously Billy's a team player here. The segment comes off great. And there's talk in the Observer at the time that Steve Williams is in discussions about coming in, and he might actually be programmed to work with Ken. But ultimately Doc's arrest in Japan for marijuana charges is going to put an end to that. Do you remember that getting too far down the road? Because man, that could have been super fun here in 97.
No, I don't. I don't think it got down the road because we never got past, anything with Doc. That's just fantasy booking of somebody in the basement going, wouldn't it be great if?
It was written in the Observer. Bruce Prichard called the UFC trying to get
What?
rights to use Ken Shamrock's UFC footage on WWF television. WWF does air some UFC footage on TV, but is it you that called, or is that just rumor and innuendo?
No, I called him.
How does that look? Like, you just say, "Hey, we'd like to license it," sort of deal?
Said, hey, we've got Ken Shamrock here. We'd like to promote him as a UFC, um, former UFC champion and challenger or whatever. And this will give your product some exposure that
Yep.
you haven't had, mainstream exposure. And we are going to build Ken up as a star coming from your world, and we'd like to help promote. And at the same time, I think Vince had his eye on UFC as well. They were having their problems and everything. Campbell McLaren and Meyerowitz, both really nice guys. Meyerowitz maybe a little more paranoid than Campbell. Campbell's a pretty damn creative guy. I think that Campbell got it, still gets it to this day. But it was a very friendly conversation. Just how can we help each other?
So I'm curious, when you said, and Vince was looking at the UFC, does that really mean Shane? It's been said over the years that Shane really loved the idea of Vince and the company trying to acquire the UFC. Was Shane a big proponent behind the scenes to push for that?
He may have. I mean, he may have, been. I know he liked it. And he always would talk about it, but as far as him being involved in any of the talks that I was involved in and with Vince and or Meyerowitz, not really.
Was there ever any consideration giving to, hey, maybe we could bring in some other UFC fighters to help put Shamrock over? I only ask because not too long before this, ECW had Paul Varlins come in, who had been on a couple of UFC programs, only to have Taz beat him and get Taz over as this submission machine or what have you. Was that ever considered? Like, hey, maybe we could get some of their guys to come in and help him make Ken look stronger?
No, there really wasn't because the more you widen out that spotlight, the less emphasis that there is on Ken. And we wanted the emphasis to be on Ken. You don't want to have 10 UFC fighters because then you have the UFC. If you only have one most dangerous man in the world, if you have, well, this is the second most dangerous, this is the third most dangerous, here's the fourth most dangerous, it begins to water them all down. So to bring in more would have been counterproductive.
Well, let's talk about sort of the put an end on the UFC talk. The Meltzer would say they did a Ken Shamrock UFC video showing lots of UFC footage. There was more to this than meets the eye, as it's a part of a working relationship between the two promotions. Both groups are going to cooperate with each other in regard to footage, so you might see Ludwig Borgen footage on UFC. They've promised to not say anything bad about the promotion publicly, so the UFC can't bury Shamrock publicly for going into pro wrestling if they were thinking about that. And the WWF in turn will push the May 30th UFC pay-per-view. So nice little deal you put together here, Bruce. Just one hand washes the other. I like that stuff.
Right. And usually, I mean, that's the best deals when everybody benefits. If you can go into something, I just want something from you, but I have nothing to give you other than money. If I can give you something that you can't get on your own, or create something for you that can only materialize over here, then that's special. And that's what we were able to do and create.
So before you know it, we do have a mixed martial artist who's coming in here. I don't think at that point he had done anything with the UFC. He had been in Pancrase and a few others. Eventually, he would have a couple of UFCs under his belt. I'm talking about Mr. Vernon White. And man, I remember this. It was just something else. Vernon White comes into Raw and he's going to tap out in what's called a no holds barred exhibition. It only takes 2 minutes. And it was, well, not very good. Meltzer would say this was real bad. Shamrock has great charisma walking to the ring, but they have no clue how to book him, and this was a major step backwards. There's nothing that looks worse than a fake UFC match. The crowd didn't react and booed the tap out from punches, since wrestling fans see that in almost every match as nothing but a transition spot. They needed a submission finish. White needed 9 stitches since the glove punches, even with Shamrock holding back, actually opened up his head badly, and they went to the finish before doing a lot of planned spots. The camera shot away from the blood since it wasn't planned, but the rest of the show, there were 2 huge splotches of blood all over the mat, and there was White's blood all over Shamrock's chest. Vince then plugged the UFC pay-per-view on May 30th and said that no-holds-barred fighting is really misunderstood by many Americans, and talked about how it incorporated tactics from wrestling, karate, and jiu-jitsu. Vader came out and had a confrontation with Shamrock, and then Vader destroyed Frank Stiletto in a style that Shamrock should be using, which was stiff blows, power moves, and submissions. This is a great idea in execution, but boy, or in theory, but in execution, maybe it leaves a little bit left to be desired. What say you? What do you remember about this Vernon White experiment?
It was one of Ken's students that Ken wanted to bring in and Ken had worked with before. And it was just something to show what Ken could do. And nothing more, nothing less.
How do we choose Vader for his first opponent?
I think that when you look at a big bully like Vader, that you always want someone to be able to stand up to him, that you have a lot of confidence can bully him right back. And with Shamrock,
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.